If you're today is your first Sunday with us, we're walking through this letter of Paul to the church at Ephesus, and we are in part 2 of a kind of mini series here on marriage, the secret of marriage. And so if you were not able to be with us last week for some reason, please check out the podcast or the YouTube, as they say, and get part 1, because so much of what we're going to say today really hinges on getting part 1 right. There could be some even misunderstanding today if you're not kind of flowing through the passage with us. We talked about 3 guiding essentials for Christian marriage. Marriage is a gift from God. Secondly, marriage is not about being in love. We always marry the wrong person. And third, marriage is about the gospel of Jesus. Marriage is about the gospel of Jesus, and the Christian husband loves his wife not just because of the beauty he finds in her, but to make her an even more beautiful person, just like Christ beautifies the church. And so we walked through that and tried to understand what's happening in these 2 really rich paragraphs that capture the beauty of Christian marriage. So that's kind of big picture from last week. Now we're gonna dig in a little more and get into kind of the nitty-gritty and some of the details. But before we do, I should say to you that when it comes to understanding women and marriage, some of us guys are just a little slow. Okay, ladies, you don't have to say amen. So we're just a little bit slow. But I will say, after 33 years of marriage, I have learned a few things. For example, got a picture here. This is not AI generated. This really is Vic. Don't mess with Vicky when she is locked and loaded. Like that's what I have learned. This is real. She and Parker were cleaning out the closet to get him ready for the big move this past week. He's now in Boston. And this is what I got in the text thread. So yeah, don't mess with a woman who's locked and loaded. No, so seriously, it's all too common for husbands and wives, listen, for husbands and wives to fight each other rather than to fight for the marriage. It's just all too common. You can take that down if you want. I don't think, yeah, go ahead and, yeah, she's not thrilled about this moment anyway. Okay, so it's a thing though. It's way too common and natural in us to fight against one another rather than to fight for one another and to fight for our marriages. In Christianity, marriage is much bigger than the love of a man for a woman and a woman for a man. As Bonhoeffer said it so well last week, it's not your love that sustains the marriage, not anymore. It's not your love that sustains the marriage. From now on, it's marriage, this gift from God, that sustains your love. Marriage is sacred because it comes from God. Marriage is beautiful because it comes from God. God's love energizes it. God's love is a future love, a promise kind of love. It's easy to love today. It's much harder to love tomorrow. So we as Christians learn how to fight for marriage in a beautiful sense of sustaining this thing that's much bigger than us and worth it because of who God is. In fact, apart from the gospel, I think we could say, Ephesians 5, these few paragraphs, apart from the gospel, these paragraphs will not make any sense to a modern person. They just won't. For a wife to yield herself to her incompetent husband's leadership, it's not happening. For a husband to sacrifice himself for a demanding, nagging wife? You kidding me? People don't live that way. Unless something unless something changes both husband and wife, and as the Triangle Rick sent me this week, unless something changes both husband and wife who look to God in their marriage, right? They stop looking at each other so closely, stop hanging on every word, stop being critical of every move, and they start seeing the gospel transform their relationship. Now that's a beautiful thing. I think Everett said it really well 2 weeks ago. The Spirit of God, verse 18. So don't miss that verse 18 is the setup for everything that follows, okay? Verse 18, everything is flowing out of verse 18. Everett said this really well a couple weeks back. The Spirit is enabling all that is happening here in 18 through, really from verse 18 halfway into chapter 6 with children and parents and employees and employers and servants and masters. So the Spirit is enabling us to worship, verse 19, to express gratitude in all things, verse 20, and to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. The Spirit of God, if the Spirit of God is not at work in your heart, changing you, softening you, preparing you to submit to one another in the fear of Christ, this is a no-go. This is a non-starter. On the other hand, if he is, then we can go to point number 1 and discover what it means to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, verse 21. And we start with 21 because the next 4 paragraphs flow straight out of it, right? In the grammar of things, if you kind of study the letter and you build out the syntax, you'll see everything really kind of hangs under verse 21, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Now, here's what that looks like. Well, let's just settle in on verse 21 for a moment and make sure we see what Paul is saying. This is a big deal. It captures, verse 21 is not just a transition verse. So if you're doing Bible study here, verse 21 is not just a transition verse. It captures the essence of relationships in the body of Christ, one another, the one anothering of the New Testament, right here. That's what Paul's talking about. So he says submit to one another, the one another element of this is really big. There are more than 20 distinct one another's in the New Testament. Welcome one another, serve one another, help one another, care for one another, love one another. The apostles love to talk about the one another's, right? I think this is probably one of the hardest one another's in the New Testament. Verse 21. Submit to one another? That's next level Christianity. To submit to another person is next level Christianity. Yielding your will to the will of another person. So let me throw a little technical definition from the New Testament on the board here. When the New Testament writers use the word submission or submit, they're describing voluntarily yielding yourself to someone else because of love. Anytime you read that in the letter of Paul, Ephesians chapter 5, submission language, that's what's being talked about. A personal, voluntary, willful, free yielding of myself to another person because of love. In Christianity, something happens to us, and God changes our hearts, and we now have a willingness, we have a freedom to say, I don't have to have it my way. I don't have to fix, I don't have to be in charge of this one. In Christianity, submission is never forced or coerced. That's something that is often misunderstood about the Bible. In the New Testament, as the disciples all submit to one another, and that's who we're talking about here. We're talking about the church at large here in verse 21. Paul is thinking about the church at large, all of us treating one another with such respect and honor and humility that we yield to one another in an unforced, uncoerced kind of way. Why? Because it flows out of love. The love of God. That's why verse 21 says, Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Don't miss that last line. Submit to one another, yield to one another, voluntarily give up your rights toward one another because of Christ and what he's done for you. Because of love. We're not forcing anyone. You can't force anyone into this relationship. Not as believers. This is such a big deal in the New Testament. Like, we're not even talking about husband and wife yet. So just make that real clear. This is all the disciples we're talking about. This voluntary yielding to one another is a defining characteristic of the kingdom of Christ for every disciple. Matthew chapter 5, blessed are the meek. Blessed are the meek. Or Matthew 22, whoever wants to be great among you, you must be a servant first. Or the classic in Philippians chapter 2, in humility, count others as more important than yourself. Have this mind in you which was in Christ, who, being in the form of God, did not cling to his divine authority. Didn't say to the Father, I don't have to submit to you. Instead, he willfully laid down his life in concert with the Father's will. He became obedient. Philippians 2 says, he became obedient. He willfully, freely chose obedience to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and gave him a name that stands above every name. There is a glory coming on the other side of your willful submission. There's a glory coming. There's a weight of glory being formed in your soul. There's something good happening being formed in your soul when you imitate Jesus Christ in a willful obedience to the Father by the Spirit to honor the Son in this new covenant community. And so this humility and submission to one another was unlike anything else in the ancient world. I mean, the church was weird to those watching, just like it is today. I mean, it was one thing for younger people to respect their elders. The elders in the ancient world expected that. It's another thing for the elders to observe other elders showing humility to the next generation. 1 Peter 5. That didn't happen in groups and communities and societies in the ancient world. The elderly did not show humility to the next generation. But Peter says that's the characteristic of the kingdom in 1 Peter 5. So, Paul, I think, is really interested in helping us see this is the vibe, this is the atmosphere, this is what you will experience in the new covenant community called the church. There will be people all around, everywhere you turn, honoring one another, showing humility toward one another, submitting to one another, deferring to one another, not having to have it my way. That's the characteristic of the kingdom. That's what Jesus was talking about. That's what Paul is talking about. It's how the church rolls. Well, a modern person says, well, aren't you in danger at that point of somebody stepping all over your rights and kind of being the boss of you? 100%. Definitely in danger of that. The gospel's dangerous. It's going to happen. But it's worth it. It's worth it. So that's the setup to what we now see. Okay, so Paul has set up this gospel rule for the whole community. And now he wants to explain how it works in the Christian home. It's really important to him and to the church that he work this out between husband and wife and children and parents. We're going to talk children and parents next Sunday. But first, husband and wife. So, point number 2, here's how this works out for wives. Receive and respect your God-given leader. Marriage is a gift from God. Your husband is a gift from God. Receive and respect that God-given leader. So he says in verse 22, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. He takes this general principle of submission to one another, and now he works it out. And as he does, he wants to maintain the goodness, the beauty and goodness of the creation order that we saw in Genesis. So this is Paul going back to pre-fall, right? So some might say, well, submission, that's part of the fall. That's just part of the abuse of hierarchy or patriarchy in the New Testament. No, that's not it at all. Paul goes back prior to Genesis 3. He sees this as a good thing in the creation order and a beautiful thing. So he wants to set it up that way. There are unique roles for husband and wife according to the creation order of Genesis. So for the wife, he keeps the language of submission. The language of submission that he gave to the whole church, he now keeps it for the wife in order to affirm the goodness of her husband's headship. And you see his headship throughout the passage. There's really no dancing around that. That's a really important observation to make in verses 25 and following. So for the wife, he keeps the language of submission, but for the husband, he speaks the language of love and self-sacrifice, still upholding the order of headship. For the wife, he speaks the language of submission. For the husband, he speaks the language of love and self-sacrifice. Both submission and love and self-sacrifice flow out of verse 21, the way we submit to one another. Now, here's what it looks like in marriage. So we'll come to the husband in just a minute. Verse 22, let's stay on the wives for just a few minutes. Verse 22, 3 key concepts. If I'm a woman, I'm looking at this carefully and closely because I want to be responsible to the Lord for what the Bible is teaching. So 3 key concepts you're not going to want to miss, ladies. Number 1, it's to your own husbands, not every man. That's an important observation to make from the text. Paul is not saying every woman submits to every man. There are extreme thinkers out there who would suggest this. I'm distancing myself from them. That is not the case. To your own husbands. Paul's not saying every woman submits to every man. I do personally think there's a unique calling for men to exercise godly leadership in the community and the church, and to put women and children first when the Titanic is going down. I think that's a thing in the creation order. But that does not mean that every relationship between a man and a woman is one of submission and headship. It's not. I don't think it is. Number 2, ladies, this is look at verse 22. Look at the last line again, and it's not last because it's not important. It's last because he wants you to see that, at least in the English rendering, as to the Lord. Submission is as unto the Lord. This is the gospel element for the wife. This is the gospel moment for the wife. This is the gospel moment for the wife, as unto the Lord. Like, her willingness to receive her husband's leadership does not start with her husband. If you keep trying to start receiving his leadership with him, you're going to keep bumping into that broken knucklehead you're married to. But if you say, well, this is as unto the Lord. This is as unto the Lord. Like, ladies, you might say, when he starts living worthy, I'll start receiving. That, he's never going to be worthy. He's never going to get there. I mean, some women, I've heard this, they've voiced this. When he starts stepping up like a man and lives like he ought to live, then I will receive and follow his leadership. Look, remind yourself of this gospel truth. You are surrendering yourself to God more than him. Don't ever forget that. This is a surrender to the Lord, not to your husband who's worthy of it. He's just not going to be worthy. His only worthiness is coming through the righteousness of Jesus Christ. Man, you can hear a pin drop right now. I'm like, what'd I say? What'd I say? This is a gospel thing. That's what I want you to hear this morning. Third, ladies, affirm the goodness of this. I think Paul, if you come to the Bible with a hermeneutic of suspicion, you will read this one way. If, on the other hand, you come to the Bible as if this is good and right and beautiful and God knows what he's doing, then you can affirm your husband's God-given leadership. You can affirm your husband's calling. This is a calling for him. Headship, which appears throughout the passage in verse 20, let's say verse 23 on, Paul's working from this concept of headship, I think from Genesis again, and his argument assumes that it is good, that God designed him to be a godly leader and provider and protector of his wife and family. Paul still thinks that's a good thing, and we still think it's a good thing, that biblical headship is by God's design and should be benevolent and protective and caring. The two tendencies that men tend, the two mistakes that men tend to make is one toward dominion, one toward domination, and another toward passivity. All right, and if you wait for your husband to stop being one or the other of those, he's going to have an even harder time to live into this godly calling. He needs you to help him discover this. All right, three really important concepts for women as they seek to receive and respect God-given leadership. I think this is all set in a good and right and beautiful, compelling argument that the Spirit makes possible. 1 Peter 3. I'm just going to throw this on the table. So submission is so powerful. Okay, let me just try to make a little more of an argument for this. Submission is so powerful as a gospel practice. Just in the church, in society, at work, with civil authorities, with parents and children. The act of submission is so powerful. The gospel practice of submission can change a lot of things, including your marriage. So 1 Peter 3, verses 1 and 2 says, "Likewise, wives, submit to your own husbands." There it is again, your own husband, not all men. "So that even if some of your husbands are not believers," there's so much power in submission. Listen to this. There's so much power in gospel submission that even if some do not obey the word, that is, they're not Christians, they don't understand the gospel, they might be won to it without a word by your conduct. There's so much power in submission that somebody could come to Christ. You could win your husband without a word, without beating him over the head with the Bible, without quoting Bible verses to him, without standing in judgment over him every week. He could be won. He could be won to Christ, Peter says, because submission is so powerful. So powerful. It's a way of enthroning Christ in the relationship. Now, because this concept has so much potential to be misunderstood, I want to roll out 7 correctives very quickly. Don't panic. Here's what submission does not mean. This is from Wayne Grudem, and I can point you to the resource later if you like. Grudem has 7 what submission does not mean. I think this is incredibly helpful for ladies. I hope you will find it helpful. Number 1, submission does not mean you put your husband in the place of Christ. It never means that. You never put your husband in the place of Christ. And if he's asking you to do something that is clearly wrong, like steal or cheat or whatever, you obey God, not men. Right? You never put your husband in the place of Christ. You never worship your husband. Secondly, it doesn't mean you give up independent thought and decisions. Your marriage will thrive when there's a commingling, even under leadership, a commingling of good thought and decision and good questions and answers. Submission, when we say submission, we do not mean giving up independent thought and decision. Third, it doesn't mean giving up efforts to influence and guide your husband. Does not mean that. Nor does it mean, number 4, giving into his every request or demands. Number 5, it definitely doesn't mean lesser intelligence or competence. Number 6, and it doesn't mean you live in fear. Some women get stuck in a really unhealthy relationship, and they live in fear because they know he's going to turn up the heat in a really unhealthy way. Could even come to the place of physical abuse. Women in this community, you should know this, women in this community are living in fear in their own bedroom. That's tragic. And that's wrong. And that's not what Paul or the apostles or Jesus have in mind when it comes to embracing this gospel practice. Number 7, submission doesn't mean inequality in any way. It doesn't mean inequality in creation. It doesn't mean inequality in Christ, right? In Christ, there's neither Jew nor Greek. There's neither slave nor free, there's neither male nor female. Like male and female. In creation and in Christ, there is zero inequality. The dignity of personhood as image bearers, we would never want to imply anything like that there's any lesser image bearing or anything like that going on. It doesn't mean any of those things. Remember, submission, what is submission? Submission is something every single one of us can practice. It is a voluntary yielding of yourself out of love. Voluntarily dying to yourself out of love. And it's through that love that you can activate the power of the gospel in your marriage. Ladies, if you invite the Lord, if you truly invite the Lord to show you what this means in your marriage, this week, next week, I think he would show you. Now we got to get to the guys. Number 3. Yeah, we're rolling. We're rolling. Number 3. Husbands. Your job is to die. That's your job. As a married couple, you're the husband in this relationship. Your job is to die to self so that she can live. Now, sometimes I hear people talk about men and women's roles in the church in such a way that it goes like this. The husband has the harder calling. I mean, submission is difficult, but the husband's the one who's called to die. Have you heard this? The husband is the one who's called to sacrifice his life, to give himself as Christ gave himself for the church. So if you understand them properly, submission is very important and it's difficult, but it's even harder for husbands to die. I don't like that line of argumentation. I think that's an insult to women. As if a woman couldn't step up and die to herself. Women want to be called to the same gospel that men want to be called to. So, I'm not a woman. I don't know what it feels like to obey this command. But I can tell you one thing, it feels like you have to die to yourself. And that's the gospel application for a wife. Now, in Paul's analogy, he's going to work it out, and it makes total sense that he is really putting a heavy weight on this because of the role of the husband in the analogy. And in the analogy, the husband is compared to Jesus, who self-sacrifice, right, gives himself on the cross to die to beautify the church, to make the church who she is. And that is the role of the husband. So I don't know which one is harder, but I can tell you what, you got to die in both cases. And so husbands, let me talk to you for just a minute. That was a long transition. I just wanted to get my thoughts on the table. All right, husbands, from verse 23 on, where you are first called the head of the wife, your headship, leadership, and authority have one great purpose. In this passage, headship, leadership, and authority have one great purpose: to love as Christ loved. To love as Christ loved. To love his bride more than himself. To die to self so that she might live. I think that's the point of the comparison. The word love appears 6 times in this section. It's the driving motivation of the husband's unique role as leader. It's absolutely necessary. Why is it absolutely necessary that love drive the authority and leadership of the husband? Why? Because our natural sinful disposition, as soon as we have an ounce of authority and power, is to do what? Is to misuse it. So Paul says over and over and over again, don't you dare misuse the authority that the husband has in his marriage. Don't do it. Love governs your every move. Now that's a tall order. The love and gentleness and sacrifice. Like if you read and reread this passage, you are going to see love and gentleness and sacrifice. If you're a husband, you're going to be like me as a young dad. You read this and read this and read this. You're like, the love, like this is so weighty. I can't live like this. Exactly. You can't. You can't do this on your own. There's no way you could do this on your own. You need the power of the Spirit of God and Jesus Christ to change your self-centered heart. The reason Paul emphasizes love and sacrifice so strongly is that we need it. We need it. He's anticipating every wrong expression of biblical headship. He's anticipating every fallen expression and abuse of what could be God-given good headship and protection and leadership. I think he's anticipating that, which is why love has got to drive all of this, right? And the reason Paul emphasizes love and sacrifice so strongly with the husbands, I'm going to say it again, is not because wives don't also love and sacrifice. Have you asked yourself this in the flow of the argument? Is Paul emphasizing love and sacrifice to husbands because they're the only ones who love and sacrifice in a marriage? 100% no way. No way. Well, what's he doing then? I think what Paul's doing is addressing the particular temptations that are tied to the unique role of husband and wife. All right, so stay with me for a moment. I think Paul is addressing the particular temptations that are tied to our unique roles. A husband will always be tempted to exercise his authority in a way that is not benevolent, that is not loving and sacrificial. And a wife will be tempted to disrespect her husband because she knows every single character flaw. She'll be tempted to disrespect him. So why does it say, let each one of you, verse 33, why does it say, let each one of you love his wife and let the wife see that she respect her husband? Is it because only husbands really need respect in a marriage? I don't think so. I mean, Aretha Franklin made it pretty clear. R-E-S-P-C-T, you got to find out what it means to me. So both husbands and wives want respect. No, what Paul's addressing in verse 33 is the temptation and the recurring sin struggle that we will have when we disregard our unique roles. I like verse 28 for husbands. I like verse 28 a lot. In the same way, we were talking about verse 28. In the same way, husbands, the same way that Jesus loved the church by giving himself on the cross so that he could make her something beautiful, in the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it just as Christ does the church. I didn't see this until this week. This is neighbor love in a marriage. Have you seen this before? I never saw it. This is neighbor love in a marriage. You should love your wife as yourself. He does not mean you should love your wife and love yourself. Go back and forth. Love your wife, love yourself. Love your wife, love yourself. You'll be happier. That's not what he means. I don't think that's what he means. I think he means your natural tendency to love yourself, put that away. Don't love yourself, love your wife. That's what he means. Stop loving yourself. That's what Jesus was teaching us about our neighbors. When Jesus says you should love your neighbor as yourself, he's not commending self-love to you. He's saying your natural desire is to love yourself more than your neighbor. You should love your neighbor first. Well, now Paul takes that and brings it into marriage and says, you know, husbands, you take care of your own bodies. You nourish and cherish it. You feed, you exercise, you work, you do whatever, and you take care of yourself. Do you take care of your wife like that? Do you care for your wife as much as you care for yourself? Men, when we learn to die to self, just like Jesus did, I'm just going to tell you what's happened to me. I'll tell you what's happened to me. The more I die to self in my marriage, the better my marriage gets. The more I cling to what I want and what I think should be done, the more I close down, marriage not so great that week. This has probably happened to you, right? Christian marriage is about the death of a husband to himself and a heart of submission and willingness to yield, which is also an act of dying to self. And then when those two people really start to yield to God, like now the marriage is going somewhere. Now the marriage is getting beautiful. Now the marriage is like, oh, this is fun. We can laugh together. We are heading in the same direction. It's not always my direction, but this is beautiful and good and right. Let me close with a really positive image of what I'm trying to communicate. This is Danny O'Shea and Ellie Cam from the United States Olympic team. You might remember them from February in the Winter Olympics. They helped the United States team get to gold on the platform in figure skating as a team sport, as the team medal. I don't think they did as well individually, but they did place gold for the United States with the whole team. And this is a really neat couple and a really... So Vicki and I like to watch this together. I'm fascinated by the athleticism. I mean, it's just impressive what they're doing. And Vicki loves the beauty and choreography because they're dancing on ice. They're dancing on ice on top of a blade that's about 1/8 of an inch thick. Now, that's got to be impossible, right? So if you haven't watched any figure skating, I'm culturing you just a little bit this morning. So if you don't care about it, just bear with me. I hope you like this, though, because this is what's cool about it. So Danny is going to take, I don't know how much she weighs, 115 pounds. She's raw muscle, He's going to take her and throw her up in the air, and her body's going to rotate 3 times, and he's going to catch her while they're moving on ice. That's crazy. Or he's going to take her and launch Ellie into a triple axel. Thank you. He's going to launch her into a triple axel, and she's going to spin around 3 times and land back on the ice. It's crazy. We just love watching this stuff. To me, it's amazing. Someone is going to fall at some point, right? Because this marriage on ice is really dangerous. And that's when it kind of hit me. That's what marriage really is like. Marriage is dangerous. Somebody's going to fall. And the grace, this is the point of the illustration. The grace in figure skating works like this. No matter which one falls, the man or the woman, what do you see happen? No matter who falls, what do you always see happen in Olympic figure skating? The partner keeps skating. And the one who fell finds their way skating back into that restorative relationship, right? Why do they keep skating? Why is it that they don't, when one of the partners falls in the Olympics, why is it they don't throw up their hands and say, "You ruined my freaking chance at the Olympic gold"? Why does that never happen? Because they've both fallen 100 times. And they feel for each other in that moment. So the partner keeps skating and invites the embarrassed, no longer Olympic run back in to finish the skate. I think that's a beautiful picture of why you don't give up on your husband or your wife. We're going to finish this routine because the marriage is bigger than either one of us. The marriage is bigger than either one of us. And I have fallen. Listen, ladies, your husband is going to fall, and sometimes he's going to fall hard. And you have to keep skating. And you have to skate right back around to him. And you have to let him back in. You don't have to. You get to. That's the beauty of grace. That's the beauty of grace. The beauty of grace is that when she falls, and she falls hard, and she embarrasses herself in front of the judges, you keep skating, and you say, "You're still mine. Get back in here." That's how this works. That's what Christian marriage is about. The world doesn't understand this. The world does not understand this. This is a parable of permanency. Figure skating is a parable of permanency for Christian marriage. I want to pray. Now, I know this room is filled with people who are not married, many singles, many who one day would like to be married, many who are sitting close to each other, who are happy to be sitting close to each other, but not everybody. So I want to pray for our present marriages, and I want to pray for our future marriages. I also want to pray for a few broken marriages. So I'm going to pray, and let's ask God to show us how to do this.